Speaking of tree changes, it's not so long ago that many agribusiness investors regarded blue gum timber plantations as the new black. Aided by juicy tax incentives, they ploughed billions of dollars into woodlots on some of the country's most productive farmland. 3 years ago, the two largest companies running plantation schemes crashed under mountains of debt. Now, many of those virtually worthless woodlots are coming down, so the land can be returned to farming.
From the West Australian wheat belt to the basalt plains of Western Victoria, a massive land reclamation effort is in full swing.
These two particular bulldozers have been going for almost a year now, clearing country, and they've probably got another 3 years to go just to clear the 6,000 hectares that in our portfolio.
It's complicated and costly and involves tens of thousands of hectares, much of it prime farmland, land that many expected would yield a bountiful and profitable crop. The crop was blue gum, or Eucalyptus globulus to give it its botanical name, the world's most widely grown eucalypt for wood chips, used to make high-grade paper.
Butch Packard is clearing his farm for the second time in 30 years. Only this time, instead of virgin bush, he's removing 337 hectares of second rotation blue gums.
For many, the name blue gum now has bitter connotations. The investors who lost many thousands of dollars in fanciful, highly speculative schemes, and the landholders who are now paying dearly to rid blue gums from their paddocks. In many cases, the promised returns vanished, quite literally, in a cloud of dust.
This machine's run on a 360 horsepower tractor, and we use every bit of that horsepower. It spins this drum with the teeth on it, and we're cutting down the stump to 50 mils below the ground level, which reduces the risk of it coppicing back again, but also leaves the maximum amount of root matter back into the ground so that it can break down and microorganisms can get back into the soil and start doing their thing, which will improve the soil structure over time.
Charles Pithy has adapted a rock crushing machine as a means of removing the sawlog residue, the large and persistent stumps.
We needed something a little bit different for the blue gums, so we've made this one as narrow as possible so that we only actually disturb the soil around the mound where the stump grows. The skids on either side are adjustable for depth control, and then we've put a roller on the back to compact the soil and help reduce moisture loss over the summer months while we wait for the season to come back around to start planting wheat or canola.
This land is at Skipton in Victoria's Western District, home to Victoria's most famous sheep studs, and for most of its history, sheep dominated the landscape. Then in the mid-1990s, the political landscape changed as well. Australia had an escalating annual timber import bill of more than $3 billion, and more native forests were being closed to logging. In response, the federal government offered generous tax incentives to anyone willing to establish plantations.
10 years ago or so, the blue gums was the flavour of the month, I think, and it was a nice feeling for people in the city to be part ownership of blocks of land out in the country growing trees.
Managed investment, or MIS schemes, sprang up, and buoyed by generous tax breaks, new companies such as Timbercorp and Great Southern became the largest players in the plantation industry. The companies grew large quickly, propelled by funds of mostly small-time investors. They bought prime farmland at over-the-odds prices and planted blue gums. What was promised were large, profitable trees harvested inside 10 years. In many cases, what has been delivered falls well short. These logs barely pay for the harvesting and freight costs to the wood chip mill.
In April, Timbercorp, the country's second biggest timber grower, came crashing down. A month later, the biggest in the business followed suit.
Thousands of investors face big losses following the collapse of Australia's...
It's been fairly messy, right through from Hamilton up through Beaufort and Ballarat, where a lot of contractors have gone without pay and had to struggle to get payment out of some of the companies. That's right. So the locals are quite happy to see the blue gums gone and the companies out of the district.
Charles Pithy watched the blue gum industry collapse and saw an opportunity.
It was only a couple of years ago when these MIS schemes started to fail, and we knew that some of these properties were going to come back onto the market. And my wife and I were obviously interested in getting back into the land market, and so we started thinking about how to get rid of trees and stumps. And after 18 months of research, we've come up with this, and already have ideas of how we can change this one to improve the efficiency of it.
These days, when Ken Fraser drives across his newly cleared land, it's a lot bumpier. The blue gums, all bar a few shelter belts, have been felled, but the ruts and ridges left by the heavy logging machinery remain. Ken Fraser farms at Warborough, north of Ballarat, close to one of Australia's first wind farms. Back in 1996, returns from grazing livestock were slim, so he leased 150 hectares of his land to Midway Plantations, a Geelong-based woodchip exporter, which was looking to recruit farmers willing to plant their land with blue gums for an annual rental. The trees were planted 2 years later. Like most plantations in southern Australia, their growth was impeded by a record decade-long drought. A bushfire also ripped through, badly damaging a large part of this stand. But worse was to come.
The value of the blue gum chips started to go down probably 18 months ago or more. The trees on my block here were good enough to harvest, and they were due to be harvested. The chipper came in, was spent about probably 5 months here last year, mobile chipper.
But almost half the trees, including the fire-damaged ones, were deemed not up to standard. Ken Fraser inherited a worthless woodlot.
I gave blue gums a go. They worked well for a while, but unfortunately the contract was cut in half. And yeah, this is the result.
Charles Pithy's stump grinding machine has been here to remove the stumps. Ken Fraser admits it's an expensive exercise, but he sees no more effective way to get the land back in shape as grazing country.
You know, it's an old saying, every dog has his day. But yeah, things have changed now and we're rethinking the whole exercise.
He's not alone. The surging Australian dollar has knocked the stuffing out of the local woodchip industry, and the knock-on effect is further hurting the plantation sector.
One of the reasons why returns have gone south is because of the huge wall of wood, if you like, that is coming onto the global market from South America, North America, and even to some extent Europe.
Midway usually ships an annual 750,000 tonnes of wood chips, mostly to Japan. But the Japanese tsunami and a decline in paper demand there has also weakened the wood chip market. A decade ago, newly established trees were a common sight. Now, new plantings have all but dried up.
At the moment, we can't see much prospect of anything more than, say, 60% of the plantation area being replanted, if that. And at the time, that will depend on a whole lot of other incentives that are in place. So a lot has to change if Australia wants to have a continuing plantation forestry industry.
It means plenty of work for contractors like Charles Pithy.
There's blue gums in Western Australia, South Australia, Queensland and throughout New South Wales. So some of those areas will be replanted or let to coppice to grow back again. But I have been told the majority of them won't be coppiced or let go to a second rotation. So that'll all be coming back and the land will have to go back into something, and it'll be either pasture or cropping.
The dilemma for landholders is what to do with these trees. Remove them or pay more money maintaining them in the hope that in the future their value will increase. Forest industry experts are advising caution. Don't rush to remove trees. They say the current wood chip glut is temporary. Some believe well-grown trees will in future be in high demand.
We still have an industry and we still have the prospect of significant value adding further downstream and a paper and pulp manufacturing industry that can be re-incentivised and revivified. There may be a recovery next year in wood chip prices, and there may be therefore a recovery in global markets, especially if there is some decline in the price of the Australian dollar.
And for those who have taken the expensive course of tree removal, Charles Pithy is proving that the land can be rehabilitated more quickly than previously thought.
This was one of the first blocks that we started on last year, and as you can see it's been bulldozed with the chain and then stick raked up into windrows. The ground was then disked once with a set of offsets and sown. It's revenue wheat, which is a feed wheat.
Since then, this crop has been harvested. It yielded better than the expected 4 tonnes to the hectare. Any wood residues, whether in windrows or in the field, will be burnt in coming weeks before the next crop goes in.
This land here is ideal for cropping and or mixed farming, with sheep being wool or prime lamb producing, so there's a lot more opportunity to get rid of the blue gums and farm it either cropping or with livestock.